Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday. That's right, it's Monday. And today on the Cultivating Mature Positivity podcast, we're going to talk about the 5 R's. That's redemption, recidivism, relationships, reconciliation, and recharging. But I'm not going to talk about those things by myself. Today, I have the privilege and the honor to introduce our guests. It's two of them, right? Mr. Terrell Warfolk. He's a formerly incarcerated individual for 30 years. He had received a commuted sentence. He's a published author, and he's also an MFA graduate. And Miss Nina Johnson, she's over at Swarthmore College. She's a professor. She focuses on social justice, race, and system changes. Hello, hello. Welcome to the show. Absolutely. I can't hear y'all. Y'all talking? Right.
I just wave and Nina, can you hear it? Yeah.
There y'all go. There y'all go. There y'all go.
Yes.
I want y'all to give a quick intro into who you are, right? And why this topic is so important to you.
All right, so my name is Terrell Woolfolk. But for 30 years of my life, I was also known as Terrell Carter. In 1992, I was arrested, then subsequently tried and convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to a life without parole prison sentence. This topic has deep meaning for me because the idea of redemption,
right.
And how that played a serious role in me being able to liberate myself, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally and psychologically as well. So like you said earlier, my sentence was commuted in 2022. And that was a whole process. It took about 3 years. The whole process took about 3 years. The stakes of it was extremely high because going into it, I understood if I got to the last stage where they did the actual end with the board of pardons interviews you, I understood what I said in that moment would determine whether or not I lived or died in prison. Lived and died in prison, or what was able to get out.
Right.
So you talking about nerves? That was like a very extremely stressful time for me.
Right.
To the point where I did that interview, and so, but redemption played a key role in my understanding of how I needed to navigate that whole process.
Yes, so I'm Nina Johnson, and I'm a professor at Swarthmore in sociology and Black studies, and I'm a researcher and a community member, a Black person. So all of these things touch my life very deeply. Terrell and I met more than 10 years ago now at Graterford Prison. We are both members of a group that is now called the Greater Freedom Think Tank. It was called the Graterford Think Tank before. We met in prison. I started going to Graterford, and Terrell and several other people who were living there at the time trained me on how to teach classes inside the prison. I teach classes at SCI Chester now as well. And we have a think tank at SCI Chester as well. And what we do is then what we did was teach classes in prison, try to bring educational opportunities inside prisons. And Terrell and others trained faculty on how to do that. When I joined the think tank, we were working on many issues, but how to raise consciousness about what is happening in this carceral system, what it's doing to our communities. And for people like me who have siblings and cousins and friends and people I grew up with, all who are currently and formerly incarcerated, it was a way for me to bring together both my work and my life and what I was going through. I had a partner who was incarcerated while I was when I started in the think tank, and a brother, and there just was so much that I couldn't touch them, but I could go to the prison every week. So the redemption, I think, works both ways. Like, we have to be reconnected to one another, and these walls are really trying to destroy our communities and keep us apart. And so I'm very grateful for the work that we do together that, not only brings us together, but brings communities together as well.
Absolutely. I just think about the programs that are out here that a lot of people don't know about, that are helping people who are justice impacted just be able to breathe again, right? And just be able to feel human, right? Because when you go in there, you don't feel human, right? They dress you up in a brown suit. You feel like a piece of, that's what they call you. That's what you feel like, right? So let's get into this. When did you first start doing the internal work, not for survival, but for self?
I don't know if it's like a specific moment.
Right.
And I think actually the day they put the cuffs on my wrist, I can remember being in the back of the police van on my way to the roundhouse and thinking to myself, like, how did I never considered myself a bad person. So how did I end up under these circumstances? And because I had that question in my brain, although initially the choices that I made were still kind of in line with the choices that I made before I got arrested, it kind of opened me up to discover all the things that I need to discover about myself in order for me to figure out like how my life ended up the way that it did. So it started, like I said, the moment they placed the handcuffs on my wrist. But coming in then, I was in Greater Fort in the early '90s, and so that was a different kind of atmosphere.
Absolutely.
And so, if you weren't careful, you can kind of get like caught up in all things jailhouse.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I had people in my life that kind of influenced, like my father when he was alive, kept talking to me. And although at the time I'm like in my early 20s, I thought I really wasn't paying attention, but I was. He was literally grounding me in some of the advice that he was giving me without me even understanding that that's what was happening.
Absolutely.
And so as a result of that, like that foundation that I had, I found myself, being attracted towards people who were moving in the right direction as opposed to the wrong direction. Not that I didn't have relationships with people on both sides of that, because I did, but I was able to understand one thing. The other thing is this, like, although they condemned me to spend the rest of my life in prison until I died, I never believed that. I never believed that. And so it was always when I get out, not if. And so as a result of that, everything that I did was about getting out of prison. Everything that I did, even if it was like on a subconscious level, everything that I did was towards that end. That even the relationships that I developed was towards that end. Everything that I did eventually came into play when I had an opportunity to talk to the people that I needed to talk to in order for me to go home. So I started surrounding myself with individuals who were kind of like moving in that kind of direction, and that allowed for my growth. But what really I think facilitated like my self-evolution was when I started writing. So like my father used to, like I said, my father died when he was 50. And that was in the year 2000. I was 30 at the time. And he used to always, like, from the moment that I got arrested, he used to always be like, yo, he called me Rafiq. He'd be like, Rafiq, you got to write. Writing is the keys to your freedom. Yeah. And at the time, I'm in my early 20s. I'm like, no, the keys to my freedom is a lawyer. Like, you keep the only thing I ever wrote was a letter. Like, and that was to try to pull a chick. Like, I'm not exaggerating. Like, I'm keeping it a being. So, like, he kept stressing this to me, and then he passed away. And so that's when I started to write. I was right. So not because I was kind of interested in it, because I really wasn't. It was because really like as a tribute to him. But I didn't know what to do. I never wrote anything before, like I said, aside for a letter, And so one of my friends had wrote a book. And so I went to him. I'm like, yo, how you do this? He was just like, I don't know. I just did it. I'm like, thank you. Super helpful. So, and then maybe like a month or two after that, he showed me this letter that he wrote. And the letter was literally a story that he would write to his friend. She would get it, and then she would write a part, and they just kept going back and forth. And so I said, you know what? Let me get that letter.
Right.
And so I copied his, and as I'm copying it, I started putting it in my own words.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the start. And so after that, I wrote my first book. I wrote it in first person. And then I rewrote it in third person, and I wrote it over like maybe 10, 15 times.
Right.
But that repetition kind of improved the skill that I didn't even know I had. And what's deep about it, like my father probably seen something in me that I couldn't see in myself.
Absolutely.
That's why he kept telling me like, yo, you need to write, you need to write. And so I started writing, and I never wrote anything before. So I'm literally like kind of teaching myself, but I think I had like a talent for it. So it was kind of easy for me. So now I'm writing these stories. And so after I wrote a couple like fictional novels, I start writing these kind of like reflective pieces, these personal essays.
Right.
And so that's when the real kind of like transformation began, because, and that's when I finally realized what my father was talking about when he kept talking about writing is the keys to your freedom.
Right.
When I started writing these personal essays, I said, oh, that's what he meant.
Right.
This is what it is, because when I'm writing about myself on these blank pages, it's just me butt naked on a page. I can't run, I can't hide, I can't lie. It's me. And so being able to see myself in that way was extremely liberating.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? All my fears, all my self-doubts, I put it on paper and I was able to see it. And so I'm just like, okay, this is what he meant. Now I understand what it means to be free, even when the space that I'm occupying is confining.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was able to like transcend all that. And so now I'm kind of open to doing the things that I really needed to do to become the best versions of myself. I was super open to that. And so like I've always been inquisitive. I've always been kind of smart. And so I'm just like, okay, what do I need to do in order to become the best version of myself?
Absolutely.
Aside from the relationships that I was cultivating these relationships, being around kind of people who were like moving kind of like in the same direction as I was.
Right.
A little bit selfish because I wanted to learn, you know what I mean? Because I wanted to improve myself. One of my good friends, his name was Muti. I remember he had like a cell full of books. And you know how it is in penitentiary. You walk past people's cells, you ain't supposed to be looking at nobody else's cells, but I couldn't help it. I just took a peek. I'm like, bro, you got all them books. Like, let me get a book to read.
Right.
He was one of them guys. He was just like, you want something to read? Come on in. All these books. So I just started getting all these books from him. Now I'm reading. Now my consciousness is beginning to like open up even more. And so all that, like I said, was in preparation for me to be able to take advantage of an opportunity when it presented itself. And so 30 years later, the opportunity popped and I took full advantage of it, and I was able to walk outside those doors.
Absolutely. Nina, how can society support the redemption journeys of returning citizens?
Well,
like that, I mean, that's really what we're here for, right?
It is.
Go ahead, tell me.
It is. I mean, I think the short answer is we shouldn't have redemption journeys because it's society that needs to change, not individuals. So everything that Rel is talking about doing, that's what all human beings need to do. We have to face ourselves. We have to face who we are, who we harmed, how we need to heal, what parts of us need to heal. Like creating opportunities for all of us to do that is the important work. I think we need to end capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, right? So that's in the long term. Then we won't have prisons. We don't need prisons.
Right.
We could address harm between each other without these things that further our harm. While we have the system we're in, what we can do as community members is, one, make sure that those walls don't become the difference between who's good and who's bad, who deserves something and who doesn't. All of us on the outside know, or should quickly become aware, that all of us have, with the laws we have, committed a crime. That's number one, right? So the wall is not the difference between somebody who's committed a crime according to our system and who hasn't. The wall certainly isn't the difference between who's harmed someone and who hasn't. We have all harmed someone, ourselves and one another.
Right.
So I think if we can break down those artificial walls, then we know that some of our best and brightest people are inside. So it isn't that we need to do them a favor when they come home. We need them home. We need their brains. We need their ideas. When I first talked about it, I didn't say that I went to the prison and I trained Terrell. I went to the prison and Terrell trained me. Right, on how to do this work, on what to read, on how to think about it, on how to change how I was teaching and how I was thinking, so that I could do this work in a way that was honoring, not just to incarcerated students, but to all my students.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is really important. And when I go inside and somebody's like, oh, you need to read this book and you need to do this and check out this. And I just thought about this idea and let's work on this together. It isn't that we need to do folks a favor by welcoming them home. We need them home. We need your gifts and talents. The world is in trouble, and we have locked up the solutions to a lot of our problems. And so
absolutely,
for us, we have to really begin to understand what this system is and what it's doing. We also have to understand it could be any of us on the other side of that wall who have not yet been incarcerated, and that we have, if we're going to survive this administration, if we're going to survive capitalism, if we're going to survive the world that's been made for us and all these wars that are beginning to start, we need each other. And so we have to fight for our folks inside to come home, and we have to welcome them. And welcome them, one, because we love them. You know, like these are our friends, our fathers, our brothers, our cousins, our sisters, our mothers, our daughters, our children. Like these are our folks, you know. So we are connected. We belong to each other. So it is very important that we welcome our loved ones home, and not just welcome them home, but give them the space and help create the space together for all of us to live our gifts and talents. You know, Rel shouldn't come home and, you know, we talk about this a lot. People need work, you know, like people need jobs and housing and basic things they needed before they went in.
Right.
Are the same things people need when they come home. And our families are overstretched, and we need money. We need investment in our communities. We have to make demands on this system, right? It isn't just like, let's just get them home. That's just step one.
Right.
Like we're still Black people in the United States living in poverty mostly, right? So we got to fight the same fights. We just need our folks home to fight with us. And I think we need each other. We got to keep fighting. We got to keep working. And we have to realize that and think about it more globally than just, I want my cousin home. I think that's important. We all have our loved ones and family members and friends who we want home, but we have to be fighting even once that person comes home. I think that's what the Greater Freedom Think Tank does well, is that we have lots of members most of whom were serving life sentences who are now home, but that doesn't end it because Rel's home.
Right.
No, we keep going. Who's next? Who can we bring home next? Who can we get out next? And then at the same time, how can we change the laws and fight with our legislators to say the system is not working? Right. It keeps some people working as corrections officers, but for the most part, that's all it's doing. It's making profits for these companies so they can get the phone calls and the commissary and upcharge everybody for all these things. But it doesn't work for us and our folks, and we will not stand for it anymore. We have to stay on top of this.
So Saturday, I went to a Black Men Hill. They do this annual thing, and they were talking to people about trauma, right? Dealing with trauma, getting over trauma. I heard a man speak on how the system isn't broken. It was created to do exactly what it's doing. Here we are trying to break something that was created to do exactly what it's doing. And we get little victories here and there, right? But a majority of us, we have people still behind bars that didn't commit the crime they were convicted of, that got too much time for something that wasn't as as hard or as rough as they try to make it seem. But I have a question. What role does education play in helping people reconstruct their identity after this trauma, right, of being locked up? And either one of you can answer that question.
So I think that we have to be clear about what we mean when we say education. Because the things that we're taught in school does nothing but help to support and maintain the systems that oppress us. And so we really need to know what kind of education that we need to help us liberate ourselves. One of the processes that I had to go through in this journey of self-discovery. So like, and talking about trauma, I was traumatized by a society that told me my blackness wasn't shit. Excuse my language. Can I cuss? Just for emphasis.
Feel free, please.
So like I grew up in a society,
right?
I grew up in a society that taught me that my blackness wasn't shit, that it was evil, that it was ugly, that everything, all the African characteristics that I had weren't pleasing, that they, belonged in the jungle, running around cannibalizing each other. So that shit traumatized me. And not just me, but everybody that I grew up around, because I'm a dark-skinned black person. And so I was teased unmercifully. Like I hated myself. I used to go to bed at night and pray to God when I woke up the next day that I would be a shade or two lighter. Destroyed my self-esteem as a child. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the reasons that was the reason why I made some of the decisions that I made that ended up sending me to the penitentiary. And so remember I talked about when they first put the handcuffs on me, I tried to figure out like, how did my life turn out the way that it did? And so as a 23-year-old, not really being sophisticated enough to figure it out, the one thing that I could figure out on my own was the fact that I was using drugs, right? I was getting high. So that's me being high. I made some real crazy decisions.
Yes.
And so then I asked myself, well, why was you getting high? And that's what took me down this path of, okay, like I really didn't like myself.
Right.
Okay. So as the years went on, these questions kept, marinating in my brain. And so
you ask that question enough, you'll get to another question that's underneath of that question, right? And then you're like, oh God, I'm going too deep, right?
No. But I had to go that deep in order for me to become who I am today.
Absolutely.
And so like asking myself these questions, I realized I was getting high. Why was you getting high? Well, I didn't really like myself. Then I had to think back to the trauma of my childhood, right? And so I said, okay, what can I do to fix that? I don't know. If I don't like myself, the opposite of that is to like yourself,
right?
Or love yourself. So how you do that?
Right.
I thought about the people in my life that I really loved, and did I really feel that way about myself? And I figured I didn't. I said, okay, so how can I create that?
Right.
So the first thing I thought of was, okay, maybe you need to get to know who you are first. Because I can't love something I don't know. I'm sorry, I just can't. I need to know something in order for me to love it. And so, okay, that's my first task. Who was Terrell? So, and thinking about that, I got these I had these kind of like ideas about who I was because I never really gave it no thought. I had these ideas about who I was, but I really wasn't sure if what I thought about myself was true. And so I started asking people that cared about me, how do you see me? And so people would give me all these different characteristics. And so then it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, tell me something bad. I want to hear all the negative stuff because I can think of all the good stuff on my own. I need some bad stuff. So then people start telling me all these not so positive things about myself. And so what I had to do in that moment was learn how to shut up. Right. Because when people tell you something about yourself and it's not flattering, the first thing that you do is you become defensive.
Right.
You argue.
Right.
And I did that initially, but then I had to learn, like, just quiet down and listen to what people have to say. And so I took all this information in, the good as well as the bad. And then I had these affirmations. I used to say, this is who I am. And I say it to myself every day, right? I was able to accept everything, the positive as well as the negative, meaning the only way that I could change it, I had to first accept that this is who I am as far as the negative stuff. And so that's what I was able to do. I was able to figure out who I was. And after that, I had another affirmation. I would repeat who I was using all the characteristics. And then I would just repeat to myself that I love myself. And I would do that every goddamn day, 3-4 times a day.
Right.
And what I realized after a few months, I started feeling a whole lot different.
A whole lot different.
I really, it changed how I operated. And I noticed that immediately. Certain things that I used to do, I would no longer want to do because it wasn't good for me.
Right.
And so that whole journey, and that goes to like what can be done.
Yeah.
Like far as like educational wise, we need to teach our children who they are and how to love themselves.
Absolutely.
Because they get constantly bombarded or assaulted with things that damage them psychologically and emotionally.
Boy.
Just like I was damaged psychologically, emotionally when I was a child.
Yeah.
Our children are still going through that.
Yes, even worse now. Even worse now. Because if first it was just in school, you could go home, you might be able to get away from it if home was a little safe. Now it's in their face every day. It's on their phones, right?
Everywhere.
And they're looking at it. Boy.
It's even in the language that we speak. When we refer to ourselves as black has all these negative connotations associated with them. We internalize all that.
Go ahead, preach, brother. Preach.
We're not conscious of it, so we internalize all this stuff.
Yes.
And then we wonder why we act so crazy towards one another, especially our young people.
And that's why we really have to. I mean, I'm agreeing with you completely. And that when I think of education, especially as a professor of Black studies, that's really important. Like we have to know ourselves. We think about often like the violence that we see sometimes in our communities, and that is a byproduct of not knowing who we really are and our ways of being, right?
Yes.
We're told that we're the worst and we treat each other like we're crabs in a barrel and we always have problems and we always mistreat each other. That's ahistorical. The reason there are Black people still around is because we take care of each other, even now.
Right.
But we circulate this language all the time, like, see, this is how Black people are. We can't do this, and we be more like this group and that group.
Right.
They're ripping each other apart. Right. So don't think like their water is wetter and their ice is colder and there's something wrong with us. There is nothing wrong with Black people. Nothing. We have endured the most violent. They try to kill us every day. Every day. We have to understand the trauma of poverty, of not knowing where your food is coming from, where if you're going to be evicted, where your housing is going to be. That is trauma. And so like we are alive. There are Black people still on planet Earth because we take care of each other. Right. And we have got to instill in our young people that's our way. Yes. We look out for each other. Yes. We keep each other alive. We make sure we eat. We make sure we have this and that. When they deny us of everything, we share what we got and we make it do what it do. And we have to get back to that. And I would say, you know, we think of it as harming our most vulnerable parts of the Black community, but I see the best and brightest in our college students, quote unquote, right? They're supposed to be the ones that are going to make it. Right. They're just as confused, just as lost, and just as walking in the wrong direction. Absolutely. All of our people need to be reminded of who we are, and this is the right moment for it. Yes. And we have to start speaking those things and stop saying such negative things about us. Like when we fundamentally understand the structural conditions that we're in, we're doing wonderfully, number one. Number two, if we don't begin to change that, people don't understand why we're in the situation we're in. People think we're in a situation because there's something wrong with our culture or there's something wrong with us. No, we have a set of social, political, and economic policies every day that try to block us and stop us from doing everything. They're trying to get rid of our history because they don't want us to know all that we have done and who we are. And so we have got to know if they're working that hard to stop us from knowing who we are, there's a reason.
There's a reason why.
And so we have got to get back to the kind of education that when I came home from school, when I was a kid, my parents would be like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is right, this is who you are, this is where you come from, this is what this means. We have got to get back to that. We cannot let these schools tell our children who they are.
You know what's crazy too? I just had a conversation with somebody fairly recent, and we was just talking about the conditions of black people. And so, this guy, he went into, oh man, we always doing this. All we have to do is this. All we have to do is that. And I'm just like, bro, let me put you on some game real quick. Everything that you just described has been tried.
Absolutely.
I said, but you know what happened?
Right.
They destroyed it.
Right.
You have a group of people who are actively engaged in keeping you oppressed, and they will kill you in order to maintain the system as it is right now. I said, you heard of the Black Panther Party, right?
Right.
You see what they did to them?
WIC program, right? The daycare, childcare, aftercare, pre-care.
They either in prison or they writing cookbooks.
Right.
Right now, they destroyed them.
And there is story after story everywhere around, not just the U.S., but the Caribbean, Africa, every continent. Black people constantly rebuilding, remaking, taking care of ourselves and each other. And when people say, "Oh, like stop doing this," just leave Black people alone.
Please.
Like we're not asking for all. Just leave us alone. We know how to make it do what it do. Just leave us alone. We're always building. We are the creators of culture around the planet. Like, and every time they take, we just make. We like you can have that. We'll make something else, and we'll always do.
Make it better, right?
Always do.
We'll make it better.
So,
something that
we are
agrees with our community, right?
Yeah, Black people are amazing.
Yes, we are
amazing.
Terrell, what were the hardest habits or mindsets to unlearn after release?
After release, you talking about
after you were released from jail?
So the habits that I developed while I was in prison.
While you were in jail.
Okay, yeah. So I think, so we talk about like re-entering back into our communities and the adjustments that have to be made and what we need, like materially, like materialistically, shelter, clothes, food, where we're gonna work, all that kind of stuff. But after doing 30 years, there's some things that you bring with you that you're not even aware of.
Right.
And the hardest adjustment that I'm still making is with the relationships that I have. I'm just not used to being in relationship in this context, right? So I'm trying to think of like a clear. Okay, so for example, I'm just coming home. It's 2022, and everybody has an idea about
what you need,
not what I need, how I'm going to be in relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And so my daughter had an idea, my wife has another idea, my mother has an idea, and they're all competing with one another.
Right.
Because everybody needs my attention all the time.
Right.
And so what I'm bringing with me is I just need to be by myself. I need that kind of space. And so that's not reconciled with what everybody else wants.
No,
and so that's been an adjustment. Not just that, being in a penitentiary, being stuck. And so COVID was traumatic.
Right. I bet it was.
It was traumatic because we was locked in the cell. At least I was locked in the cell with somebody I didn't even like. When they first locked us in, it was for 23 hours and 45 minutes. They was letting us out 15 minutes a day. Either get on the phone or take a shower. You couldn't do both. And so I was stuck in this small space with somebody I didn't really get along with for months and months and months.
Right.
It's traumatic for me. So I found myself in that space looking for some solace, some peace,
right,
some privacy,
right,
and I couldn't never get it.
And
so it was a urgency that was kind of like built up in me, and when I came home, it didn't go anywhere. I brought that out with me, and so now I might be sitting in the house just by I might be in the front room sitting in the house just watching TV or scrolling through my phone, and then somebody would come and say something, and I get irritated.
Right, quick.
Not even understanding that this is what I'm showing. And so I figured it out because my mother asked me one time. She said, "Bobby, getting on your nerves?" And I'm like, "Nah, why you say that?" But then, I'm a highly reflective person, so I had to think about it. And I was like, "Oh shit, she do."
Right.
Right. But I understood it. I understood too where it was coming from.
Right.
It was coming from being in that space, not having any way to alleviate the pressure that I was feeling from being confined like that. And so I'm still kind of like working on being conscious of feeling like my privacy or my alone time is being interrupted and not taking it personal, not being irritated by that, understanding that people just want to be around you because you've been gone for so long.
Right.
And that helps me kind of temper the irritation of being kind of like my peace being interrupted.
I feel like we've talked about this a little bit, but like when you're waiting for somebody to come home, you just think, when my brother gets home, it's gonna be this. I can't imagine like if it's my dad. Like when my dad gets home, everything's gonna be better. Like this is what I've been waiting for, And so all you want is like whatever. And I hate to call it a fantasy, but like whatever fantasy you had of like, I'm just gonna spend all this time with my brother. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do everything together.
Here's the thing, Nina. So particularly with my daughter, these ideas aren't, because my daughter damn near 40 now. Right. But these aren't the ideas of a 40-year-old wife. These are the ideas of a 6-year-old. Right. So she's been imagining and fantasizing what it was going to be like when her dad came home since she was 6. Yeah. She held on to that. And so now when I'm coming home, here's a 6-year-old.
Right.
Like let's go get some ice cream.
Yeah. Take me to the park. Push me on the swing. Right. Things that happen. Right. And that, I mean, that you would think that might have been something that you wanted to do. Right. You might have wanted to push her on the swing or take her to go get some ice cream. So it's you're looking at her like you said she's 30. She was 36 when you came home.
30 something. She's 36-year-old. She's 37. But here's the thing. So for me, and I kind of understand that, right? But more than that, though, what I needed for everybody else to understand that I'm running 30 years late. Mm-hmm. I have to build a whole life for myself, and I'm starting nothing. So like I can't give you the attention and the time that you need because I need it for myself. Mm-hmm. I need to get myself right.
Was it hard to say that to your family? Like honestly to say, I know this is what you have a cup. You need me to pour into it. But I'm 30 years deep like into this. I got to get over that and then allow for water to be poured into my cup before I can even attempt to try to pour into your cup, right? Because that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but no, it wasn't hard for me to say that because it wasn't because I needed to because I was getting all this pressure put on me and that wasn't good for me physically. No, it wasn't. Like I'm saying, like, listen, give me some grace, give me some time. It's a much better now.
Right, I bet it is.
When I first came home. Mm-hmm. My daughter stopped speaking to me for a while. My sister stopped speaking to me. It was crazy. And so, I had to tell them, like, listen, I'm coming home with absolutely nothing. And I have to build a whole life. Give me some time to adjust, to learn how to be in relationship.
Right.
Outside of a prison context. Because before, when I was in prison, it was phone calls for 15 minutes apart. It was a visit for an hour and a half or 2 hours.
And then you're gone.
And so that was the extent of the relationships that I had. My relationships was defined by the carceral system. Now that no longer exists, so I need time to adjust. I need time to figure out, like, how can I divvy up my time so that everybody will be cool.
But it's also that like those visits, just speaking as a family member, are uninterrupted time.
Right.
You don't have anything else to do.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's grateful for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that time feels like, that's how it's gonna be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so as your friend, who loves you, I'm like, that totally makes sense, bro. Like, you totally need some space. Tell him to give you some space, right?
But as a
With
family
my
member,
own family, I'm like,
right.
what you mean?
No.
You know, I'm coming.
No.
Yeah. So it's really helpful to have these conversations, you know, because it really helps you give your own family grace and like space. Because I mean, when you're saying this to me, and I'm like, I've never been locked up. I need my quiet time, my alone time. Where, you know, I can't imagine not having been alone for 30 years.
My wife says things like this sometimes. She says, well, when you were in prison, you was like, I said, that's not fair to me. I said, because you have to understand, while I'm in prison, it ain't a lot I got going on. So you have my undivided attention.
Right.
It's just me and you.
It's me and you.
I'm home now, and it's a gazillion things coming at me. All of them deserve a little piece of me. Because, like I said, I'm trying to build a life. I'm trying to recreate something that I lost. Not get back what I lost, but build from the time that I have now until I die. I got to be able to. I can't take no breaks because I don't have that much time left.
You really don't.
And so, and I'm explaining this to her like it's different now. Like you can't compare how things were while I was being held captive as opposed to now. Like it's not fair to you or I.
Have you ever thought about going to therapy?
Yeah, but I just didn't do it.
Why not? So
not because I I'm opposed to it. I just ain't never sat down and took the time out to do it.
Right. And for me, right, I didn't do nowhere near. I did 18 months. After those 18 months, I was done. Right. It was no way I was going back. But I had to go to therapy because when I came home, I brought a lot of those situations with me, right? Like you said, not being alone, right? And not knowing where to find myself in the street and trying to come home and rebuild myself and people pulling me. I mean, from day one of coming home, it was like, okay, you back. Let's get to it. It's like, huh? Like let me I just left one of the most traumatizing situations that have ever happened to me in my life, aside from being dead, which I wasn't, but still, let me breathe. You feel me? Like, give me a couple. I might need a couple months. Like, back up. Like, but it was hard. And I came home and I felt like you said, you mentioned earlier with the drugs and the being addicted. I realized when I went to jail, I said, why am I here? It's because I was high. I was playing around, right? So how can I change that? All right, I won't do the drugs anymore. I'm gonna chill off that. But that addiction was still in me, right? For something, right? And it became women, right? It became doing things and that became too big. And when I got filed for a divorce from my wife, it was like, yeah, I got to go get some help, right? Because I don't want to continue, because the addiction just gets passed on to something else. If you don't understand why you're addicted to something, if you don't understand your abandonment or your attachment issues, you feel me? You just attach it to something else and just keep riding with that, right? So for me, it was understanding that, you know, I have abandonment issues from my father dying when I was 12, right? He left me and I didn't have nobody there to light the way for me to walk, right? You were talking about your father and how he helped you and told you, you know, oh man, you need to write. I didn't have that, right? So I was searching for that, and I was searching for it from different men in my community, and it wasn't there. It wasn't there the way I wanted it to be there. So I went to therapy, talked to my therapist, and my therapist, he gave me all the tools I needed. I just still didn't know how to use them. So now I'm running in the things I need to use a mallet for. I'm using a hammer and I'm putting a hole in the wall. It's like, I got to tear the wall down and put it back up again and say, all right, don't use this, use this, right? So, I mean, all of these things are possible in our community. We just need to talk to someone to let it out, right? So, and then be able to receive the information back in. And that was when I was talking to you earlier, the question I had asked you was on recidivism. Nina, this is for you. From your research and experience, what systems push people back into prisons?
Well, I hate to use the obvious one, but capitalism. You know, the reason people go to prison is not because they're doing things wrong, but because it's profitable, right? Drug use is common, constant across class, across race, but we know who's being locked up for it, right? I mean, we could talk about all the levels, and most people are not incarcerated for violent crimes, right? So what we're really looking at is a system that deals with our surplus labor. And so when we're like, why do people who are poor go to prison? Well, because we don't have a system to support all these people working. So part of all of this is we have to change our economic system. But I think in the meantime, we have to really think about the educational opportunities that are being provided for people inside that help them become employed when they come home. Now, often people like folks on the outside who are Black are underemployed. So somebody like Terrell, who comes home with a bachelor's degree from Villanova while being incarcerated, may not have anywhere to work that cares that he has a bachelor's degree from Villanova, right? And so a lot of times we do have a mismatch. People come home from prison with HVAC skills and building skills and all kinds of things that they have taken the time and energy to acquire inside, but they won't get hired in the unions or all kinds of things. And so what we have to think about as communities is one, entrepreneurship, but also like thinking about our own hiring. If we're in a position to hire our folks, we need to. As somebody like me who's a professor and a researcher, I can hire somebody like Terrell to do research who has the skills and the time and the talent to do it. And so we always have to be thinking about first, how do we make sure that those of us in positions to do so can help folks? And now Terrell's in a position to hire people, and he's in a position to make sure people are looked out for. We also have to hire and work with people while they're incarcerated. So they're building that experience while they're on the inside. We have a lot of folks who are still serving life sentences at Phoenix and at Chester. And shout out to all of them: Eric Joseph, Matthew Garcia, Quasheen Richburg, Diane Phillips. I could go on and on. Sadiq Palmer, we can go on and on. Charlie Bassett, Vern Robinson. Shout out to all our folks who are still serving life sentences. We love them, and they need to come home. So it's working to make sure their cases stay in court, and it's all of those things. I mean, Terrell has not talked about all that he's doing, right? Those pulls from your loved ones are not just from people on the outside who are waiting for you to come home. He's getting calls constantly from people who are still on the inside, who are saying, you know, who need to stay encouraged and need to stay loved on, to know that people are still fighting for them and rooting for them, you know, which is why we still go inside the prisons. We're not going to stop doing that no matter how hard they make it, because our folks are still in there. So I would say it's set up for people to come home and go back because the system is profitable. In Pennsylvania, there are 826 things you can't do with a felony conviction. That's a lot of prohibition that you got to be reminded of. A lot of folks go back for having to pay court fees. It's just a money issue that makes people violate back. So the system is not set up for any of us to do well, let alone somebody who has a felony conviction or is coming home. So we all have to work together as a community to be there for each other, to look out for each other, right? To make sure we prevent all of our young people from going in, but also making sure that those who come home stay out.
Absolutely. Let me add to that a little bit. So, this is once again when I first came home. This when Shapiro was running for governor, so he came out West Philly to this church in the campaign, and you know he was a part of the board of pardons that that commuted my sentence. And so as he's talking, he's seen me. And then he started talking about me. You know, I'm gonna hold you accountable. This and that, and this and that. Yeah. So
who is he?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So you know, he said what he said, and so after he finished, I stood up. I said, "Listen, I don't have a problem with being held to account for anything that I do."
Right.
I said, but since we're talking about accountability, let's talk about this. I said the Pennsylvania correctional system has a 75% recidivism rate.
Right.
It's completely broken.
Right.
I said that wouldn't stand in no other company in the country, in the world, that type of failure rate. I said, because they're not there. And so I said, so what happens is this. I said, these young dudes are coming in the penitentiary, right? And they're marinating in dysfunction. They get amongst one another and reinforce weird behaviors.
Right.
Right. And so when you had guys like us, older guys, we coming up with programs and
Mhm.
stuff for these young boys to do,
Right.
instead of facilitating that, the institution would get in the way.
Right. All the way.
Wouldn't allow us to do
Right.
the things that we need to do to help these
Right.
young men.
Right.
Right. And so I said, so if you want to talk about holding people accountable, you need to look at the DOC and start holding them to account as well. I ain't got no problem with it, but you need to hold. I mean, because you're gonna be the governor, right? You the boss, so start holding these people accountable, because that's ridiculous. And I told him, I said, I'm starting to believe y'all don't care that so many people come back, because when they leave, they're not going to your neighborhoods. They're not going to your neighborhoods. They're going back to our communities.
Even the ones that are going back to their neighborhoods, they're not really worried about them, because they know they'll be able to get them a job. They'll be able to look out for them. They'll be able to make somebody look the other way and make sure they're good.
Yeah, but it ain't a lot of them going back to where Shapiro live.
Sure, none of them. You know what I mean? The white folks that are in those prisons are coming from those out counties where there used to be agriculture and steel factories,
Right.
and the same joblessness and loss of work is hitting them just as hard. And
out there, though.
And that's why they're building the prisons, because that's where those folks who used to work in those industries can work. And then they got to be, the ones who are from there got to be shipped down here, because they can't be in a prison where they know everybody, all the cousins, and everybody's a corrections officer. But it's not good all around. And if white folks could start to really, particularly working class white folks, could start to see that this system is hurting them in all of these ways, rather than fighting with us, they would follow us.
They'd rather hate black people just because
which is crazy. Like it's hurting you too.
That's
that's what Fred Hampton was trying to do.
He was.
Yeah, the People Party. So that's where I've been at for the last 7 months, right? Trying to understand, why do these two parties that say they help us and give us resources and help us with welfare and help us with helping us become someone new or pull up our bootstraps and continue to do what we should do as people, why don't these two parties serve us? And then I talked to a friend of mine, and we were talking about creating our own party. He was like, we need the People Party. He was like, that's kind of what Fred Hampton was talking about. I said, absolutely. I said, that's why they killed him, bro. Absolutely. Because he was bringing people together that were under the same thumb. Listen, we're all under this oppression thumb. You're not part of that 1%. You're not getting any money. And we fighting each other. They got us fighting each other, and they sitting back smoking cigars and drinking whiskey and laughing and looking at us like we're crazy. So it's like, how do we bring people together? It's just by doing that, seeing the differences that are not really there, seeing that we share more in common than we share different.
See what happened in New York? They thought they were electing a Democrat. They got a socialist, that Muslim socialist, and the Democrats are hot as fish grease. They're like, we cannot have this fool messing up our sweet situation. And they're going after that young man when he won. Zoran Mamdani in New York City. He's a Muslim Democratic socialist. He's talking about no more rent, free buses.
Governor?
He ran for mayor of New York City.
He won?
And he won the Democratic primary against Cuomo and that ex-cop, Eric Adams. Yeah.
You got to break it. I say, I don't mind Trump being in office. Things got to burn down.
Listen, I hope if it turns out that it wakes some people up who have not been paying attention, good. I think he's doing a lot of long-term and short-term damage that is harming us. I mean, we will, if we even survive him, like, all of the things that have provided Black people even a modicum of relief. Now, we are the ones keeping each other alive, so let's start with that. But even the parts of the system that have been in any way helpful to us, he has broken them, and will continue to break them. Things that have kept us alive, like I can name any number of things. The Supreme Court is gone. The federal judiciary is gone, right? But this long-term damage, one of getting us into wars, is not helping us, but the inability of the federal government to intervene when states are bad actors is a problem for us. Lots of people have come home because they went around the state because of prosecutorial misconduct and appealed to the federal government, right? Just getting people home is harder. We live in a state that's like, one of only 6 in the nation where murder too is a life without parole. Like there are all these ways that Pennsylvania is a bad state.
Right.
It's a bad state.
Is it because of the Commonwealth? Right. I never understood
No,
that.
it's because it's racist.
It's racist.
It's just 'cause
They
it's
got
racist. And it's because it's Philly and Pittsburgh and then a bunch of out counties of white folks. And most of those out counties wouldn't even have a state senator if it weren't for incarceration, because they used to count the people who were incarcerated there as part of the population, because they didn't have enough population to have a state senator. Now they do. Now, even though they said a couple years ago, we're not going to do that anymore, it's too late. They already have state senators who are voting for all this bad policy that's bad for the black people in Philly and the bad for the black people in Pittsburgh. So we just have Pennsylvania. Like we live in a red state, period, right? We got 2 little blue cities and 1 big red state. And so what we could do is appeal to the federal government when the state is a bad actor. We don't have that anymore, not to the federal courts, not to the Supreme Court, and certainly not to the Fed, period. And so we have a crazy senator and John Fetterman, like he done flipped all the way out. He was always terrible, but he flipped all the way out.
I think after he had the stroke, he just wasn't the same after that.
And we had a terrible governor, Sherelle Parker's terrible, like, it's bad news bears for all of us. Should I not have said that?
No,
Sorry,
I try to stay out of it. I learned my lesson about politics. Politics.
So here's the thing.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Like Michelle Alexander talked about it in her book a long time about, like this kind of divisiveness that the planner elites use to kind of like divide like the enslaved Africans with the white people.
Right.
And they've been doing that ever since. They created this idea of whiteness being right, and white people bought into it.
Right.
Because before that time there was no such thing as like race. There wasn't no white people or black people.
Absolutely.
And so in order to justify the enslavement of Africans and to subdue the rebellions that were happening because of indentured servitude and enslavement of people, they created this idea of whiteness and white supremacy. And it's been effective ever since then. Because black people buy into it too. Let me say that.
I mean, we use it more to when we're trying to step up on people, we use it the same way they do, right? I've witnessed it, I've been a victim of it. And you look at it and you say, well, how do we get our village back? Right? How do we get our people back? And I posted this last week and people were jumping on. They was like, love, respect, honor, humility. These are the different things that we should have inside of our community. And I'm like, well, if we know it, why can't we just do it? Why do we?
Because we're not being honest with ourselves. We're not acknowledging the part white supremacy plays in our life and how we think and how we see the world. When people think of white supremacy, you know what they think about?
What?
Nazis, skinheads, Ku Klux Klan. They think about it in that way. They don't think about it as an idea that shapes how you see things. They don't see it in that way. And so, and I'm gonna go back to what we kind of talked about earlier. It's really about education.
It is.
It's really about being able to control how our children are being taught so that they can understand who their enemies are and the mechanisms that they use to keep them oppressed. Because you're not going to learn that at Bartram. You're not.
Yeah. I think, I can't remember who said it, but they said it well in saying that we think that white supremacy is the shark, but white supremacy is the water. It's the water.
It's the water.
We're so steeped in it, it's not the shark coming to get us. We're in it.
Well, it's the water. And
I think we have to constantly retrain our brain to think of each other as a resource, to think of each other as, I love that quote that we're each other's harvest.
Yes.
We each other's people. You know what I mean? Like we have to see each other as a resource, and we have to constantly train our brain to, like, when we're watching the news, like, oh, don't let it be a black person. Like, black people are allowed to be human and do kinds of things and make mistakes, but we have to constantly retrain our brain. But I feel hopeful when I look at my students, and we were at a brunch on Saturday, and it was all people that I had taught inside and outside, and some of them had come home, and some of them were my undergraduate students, and they've all graduated. And these are people who genuinely love each other. So I think if we are we think we're going to have a
Did they invite me to that?
It was the Chester think tank. Yeah. Jair came home, who is from Delaware, so we had it in
Right.
You weren't coming to Delaware. Anyway, so no, you ain't getting up in the morning to go to Delaware. But I think we want a mass movement to be on TV. You know, that's what we think will be a success, to show that Black people are together. But it's one person at a time, right? Like, Rel and I were never supposed to know each other. He was supposed to die in prison, and we were never supposed to connect or work together or build or do any of the things that we've done together and continue to do together.
Right.
And so we have to think of that win and to build from there. If we sit around like, oh, we haven't done this, we're not doing that, you know, even the civil rights movement, everybody wasn't out there, you know? And so, like, we don't need everybody. I tell my students that all the time. They're like, more people, how come Beyonce? How come? I'm like, you worried about the wrong things. First of all, Beyonce's doing her thing.
Right.
But two, like, we need to be working. Don't worry about who's not here. Let's focus on who is. I feel like Adrienne Marie Brown says all the time, what we focus on grows. When we focus on who's here and we're out here and we're going to keep working and we're going to keep fighting and we're going to show up every day, that's irresistible. And so other people will join us in that love and that joy, because we're fun to be around. You know, you also can't be miserable expecting to start a movement. Right. You can't be mean and telling people they ain't read the right books or use the right words. Right. And then be like, why don't nobody follow me? You're miserable and terrible. That's why.
Right.
But we got to be loving and joyful as Black people are, and people will join us and join the work that we're doing, because it's the right thing to do. And people's hearts are calling out to do something in this moment. And I say, come on, let's go. Let's work.
Let's get it done. Let's get it done. Listen, we didn't even get to go through all the questions. I truly appreciate y'all for taking the time out to come through and talk to me. Again, this platform is open for both of y'all. However y'all want to use it, if y'all want to use it in the future, I would appreciate it, right? Because the information that you have, the experience that you've lived, they're the greatest teachers, right? And I am extremely proud to say I know you too, right? However I can help out, just call me. I'll be there, right? No problem. And this isn't in, because I want to do a part 2 of this. So if we got time, we can do it next Monday, 1:00. You feel me? We can come back. We can finish this. Because we only got to through recidivism. We didn't even get to relationships, reconciliation, and recharging. And these R's are important. They are important for us to move forward once we are released from the bondage that we call prison and jail. And if you have anybody else who you want to join in this conversation, I think it should happen organically, right? It should grow organically, but it could be a ball, right? A ball of I don't want to say anger and frustration, but a ball of love and a ball of appreciation for our men and our women that have been released from jail. Thank you. I truly appreciate both of you. And I'll talk to y'all later.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. No problem. Man, listen, that was a great podcast, man. I want to thank Terrell. I want to thank Ms. Nina for sticking through. A lot of information was shared on this podcast. So, you know what we do. Cultivating Mature Positivity Podcast. I'm your boy, Uncle P, man. I want y'all to have a blessed day on purpose, with purpose. I love you. We're out of here. Hit the music. CMPradio.net. It's the station. Listen, man, let's cultivate together. Bring us all your show ideas. Content creators, we're looking for that. Videographers, we're looking for that. You can be a part of the next great big thing that takes place right here in Chester, Pennsylvania. Let's cultivate together.